Future is now, old
Yeah,
man.
future is now, old man. Alrighty.
All right, welcome to the show.
I'm Griffin.
I'm Ryan.
Welcome back.
This week we actually have something a little different. It's a double feature. Yeah, we just decided, hey, why not talk about two movies, two for the price of one video. Today we're talking about Ichi the Killer from 2001 and
Gozu from 2003.
directed and written by the same people. They're both directed by Takashi Miike, and they're both written
Sakichi
Sato.
Sato.
Yeah, they're both written by Sakichi Sato, who you're probably familiar with if you've seen Kill Bill. He plays Charlie Brown. But who knew he can write some real crazy stuff?
Yeah, some crazy shit.
I guess. Again, it's just
Well, I think it's really interesting though is that we've come back to Kill Bill now like a couple of different ways, you know, because we made the Lady Snowblood video. This one isn't as
6 degrees of separation
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah.
Just to start, though, content warning.
Yeah, huge content warning for both these movies. They're insane.
Not
Not for the mentally stable. You want to end up like us and watch these movies.
Oh my god.
'Cause it's irreversible. You can't go back.
Yeah, once you have seen what I have seen in such a short period of time, there is no going back to who you were before that.
What I like to think about Gozu is like what the aliens would show you if they abducted you. They would show you
It's
Gozu.
an alien documentary of them trying to recreate human behavior.
Like I feel like an alien when I show people Gozu. Gozu's intended to be shown to people. See what I think is cool about Gozu from 2003. This is kind of their follow-up project to Ichi the Killer, which was like this kind of like underground, like culty international cinema hit. Gozu was intended to be a straight-to-DVD movie.
Right.
And then it did so well at the film festivals that
At Cannes.
at Cannes that they gave it. But what I love about that is it has like this weird kind of like you're intended to have a physical copy of it and like bring it somewhere and like show it to people and then like watch their reactions.
It feels definitely like a movie.
It's like 8mm. It's like got some like snuffy vibes because it's just so absurd.
Not just that, but it feels like a
shocking.
underground VHS railroad type movie.
Totally, exactly. The VHS railroad.
Like
Good.
you would like
Good Lego.
VHS rental store. This is honestly
Yeah, this is the back weird shelf at your local rental shop that is like right about to be put out of business by Blockbuster in your small town.
I think the VHS railroad is before my generation.
Definitely.
But
I do remember. I mean, like I had both these movies on DVD. Probably neither of them were. You know what I mean? Like they're probably bootlegs.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah.
You know, like
I think this is. So VHS Railroad was a period of time during the VHS rental era of American popular culture, which looking back feels like it was such a long time ago when people used to rent stuff.
Yeah.
Rent.
When people would universally ruin every single VHS copy of
of Basic
Instinct by rewinding the same section over and over and over again.
So
you knew exactly what I was gonna say too.
It's that thing. It's that weird.
It's the ubiquity. Yeah, it's the ubiquity.
So basically, you find a weird VHS movie. You gotta show it to your friends.
Sharon Stone OP.
So you burn it. You return the original copy to the VHS store, and then you keep your copy, and then you pass it to your friend. They burn it, pass it along. So on and so forth.
Each copy getting worse and worse, significantly worse, by the way.
VHS technology was not as good as MP4 technology is today, where you can just take a file and transfer it into something else.
The level of loss, though, from one copy to another was dramatic.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember watching bootleg copies of Titanic in the 90s that I would see at like friends' houses, like one or two houses over, and you literally couldn't read people's faces. You literally couldn't read people's facial expressions.
So this is actually a fun kind of anecdotal tangent story, but my first experience of watching Star Wars was a VHS bootleg copy of Star Wars that my dad and his brother had made when they were like teenagers, because they rented a VHS copy of Star Wars from their VHS rental store, and they wanted to keep a copy of Star Wars. And when I tell you, oh my God, watching that was something that I can never get that experience back.
Oh, definitely.
Being like 8 years old in the dark with just a CRT, the glow of a CRT, and then seeing it, and it wasn't the well, obviously it wasn't the theatrical release because that's just impossible. That's lost media at this point. But it wasn't the special edition either.
Exactly. I was actually about to jump in and say, I bet whatever you watched is better than what they're currently selling.
Yes. So I watched the special editions. This is such a weird tangent.
No, I'm down with it because that is exactly like we are setting like the tone for what kind of media this is.
So I watched the special editions for the first time when I was like 12 or 13, and that was like the later time because at that point
I saw them in theaters in 1998.
I think I was too young. Honestly,
yeah, I bet you didn't either. Yeah, but I saw them like we because Star Wars was still insanely popular in the 90s,
right?
And there was a lot of stuff to stoke the interest, you know, like Shaz the Empire and things like that. There was like a lot of like they were making new action figures all the time.
Media was insane. Like I remember reading more Star Wars books than anything than watching. Like most of my like conventional knowledge of Star Wars came from reading books and like this.
That's how it was in the 90s for sure.
And like my one VHS copy of it wasn't called A New Hope either. It was just called Star Wars.
That's how you know it's good.
And Jabba wasn't a slut. He was just a fat guy.
Yeah.
He was just a fat guy. And I will never get that back. I ruined that VHS. I watched it so many times. It like burnt out in certain sections of the tape.
Yeah.
And so I watched the special editions at like 12, 13. And I'm honestly very disappointed because it feels worse.
They're way worse.
Just like visually speaking,
I'm sure someday we'll go down the rabbit hole and like talk about like George and like Rick McCollum and like stuff like that.
Right.
But Rick is such a like toothless bootlicker, and I'm sure he's like a really nice person, but he just like every horrible idea that George pushed to him, he never pushed back. And you know, like the contentious relationship that Gary and George had, I think is like part of the original trilogy magic. So,
but
yeah, those special editions are horrible, and they're not funny. Like every little special edition sequence is supposed to be charming, supposed to be funny. It's got some weird like Laurel and Hardy kind of sense of humor, except it's not good. Laurel and Hardy's good, and this is not good.
The attempts they make to make it seem like it's more alien, make it seem like it's less alien.
Yes,
if that makes any fucking sense. But
it's like Walmartified for sure.
Yeah, like this looks like a Toys R Us section, which I don't know if anyone, I mean, probably people watching would know what a Toys R Us is, hopefully. Who knows? But
someday this will be lost media too.
That's essentially back to the original point of Gozu.
Mm-hmm. This movie fucking ruled, by the way.
It's like the VHS Star Wars that I watched prior to the special edition.
Too rare to live.
Yeah. And
so which one should we talk about first?
Honestly, you want to go through Ichi the Killer first?
Let's go through chronological order. And Ichi the Killer does somewhat make more literal sense, even though it's actually probably harder to watch. It does have like a plot.
I would definitely agree with that. And I think the part lends to that like kind of more coherent narrative is the fact that it is a manga adaptation.
Right. Yeah.
So I think just to start off, like
it had good bone structure to work on and get really weird with.
So Ichi the Killer is based on a manga by the same name, but also not. So there was the one-shot manga, I think it's a one-shot from 1993 called Ichi, which is what the movie for the most part is kind of based off of. And then there's the 1998 to 2001 10-volume run called Ichi the Killer, which I think is where they draw a lot of
Koroshiya Ichi.
Like a lot of the more subtle or tangential kind of story elements from, not necessarily like direct inspiration, but more of like the stylistic flair, I guess. But it was written by Hideo Yamamoto, who is I would say a prolific seinen manga author. He's been working since the 90s, and he's still creating stuff to this day, or at least I believe he's still writing stuff. Are you familiar with this work?
Just this stuff for the most part, I think.
So the only other thing that I'm super familiar from his what would it call it?
His oeuvre?
is over, I guess. Or
I've read Kuroshige Ichi, but I haven't read anything else.
I've read his other work called Homunculus. I actually haven't read Ichi the Killer or Ichi at all. Mostly one, I think this is also like kind of going back to the Lady Snowblood point I made before, where I watched Lady Snowblood and then I read the manga.
Right.
But I watched Ichi the Killer first, and then I had very little interest of reading the manga at that point.
Yeah. Especially because, like, although the illustration is colorful, I mean, like the life that it brought into it in the movie is hard to compete with for sure.
Right.
In your mind's eye,
Right.
in your heart of hearts.
Definitely coming with the understanding of Yamamoto's other work just from his manga, like Homunculus. He definitely seems interested in exploring like the depravity of human psychology and the depths at which it goes, and you know, very much like visual metaphors for human depravity, essentially, and the like, you know, the dark psyche that anyone could necessarily have in coherence to like this kind of grungy underground or crime-ridden type Japan, essentially.
Yeah. It explores like extremely kind of like marginal spaces in Japanese society.
It doesn't pull any punches in displaying like the worst that it can.
Yeah.
In the landscape of a contemporary society that has organized crime.
Yeah.
Like the effects that have on
but like mental and moral decay.
Yeah.
You know, like just like logic and reason lose its value.
Right.
But yeah. So what do you? How would you even describe like the plot of Ichi the Killer?
Oh, is that a mosquito?
Yeah, I think we got a friend. We got a cop. So like for me, you can kind of break it down to, it's a story about, it's really funny because like the writer, when he breaks down the story, he says it's essentially a love story, which is hilarious.
That's
anyone who's
I can see where the point being made that it's a love story because
Kakihara,
Kakihara
and Ichi
are essentially two extremes of very toxic manifestations of love. They're not like healthy forms of love at all. There's
nothing amorous about them at all. They're actually just violent versions of sex.
Yeah, one is a sadist, the other is a masochist.
Right.
Like it's both. They're both psychosexual to an extent.
Right. So the main character is a yakuza by the name of Kakihara, and he's actually one of my favorite fictional characters in like the history of cinema, film, like manga. He's really, really interesting. But he's like a really, really twisted, like crazy yakuza mafioso kind of guy. And basically his boss, who's like the leader of their gang, he's like kind of like you might call him like a capo or something like that, in like the kind of mafia branded terms. And he has like an overboss, and the overboss mysteriously gets killed in like a giant bloodbath, and he goes on this search to try and find out what happened to his boss Anjo. And slowly throughout the story, it's revealed that there's this like weird secret team who eliminated him, and that there's like this really weird, insane plot that a lot of it involves hypnosis.
Yeah.
But the person who perpetrated the murder is a killer only known as Ichi, which is the number 1 in Japanese.
And he has a costume too and everything. So
yeah, it's like almost parodies tokusatsu in a way.
Kinda. That was actually an interesting point that I was like picking up on, definitely. I didn't necessarily have the word tokusatsu. I definitely thought of now that you mentioned it, definitely does feel like a parody of tokusatsu. I was thinking more of, it felt like a superhero movie.
Yes. He's a really evil, sad,
easily manipulated and
superhero.
And
he's like constantly
he has a costume, and
Yeah.
he has like he's Kamen Rider to an extent, because remember, Kamen Rider only fights with kicks because they don't want to influence the kids into punching each other, so he's gotta do these crazy flips and kicks.
Except this guy is gonna accidentally cut people in half constantly.
Yeah, with his crazy kicks.
He has blades that like come out of his body
because of his suit.
Yeah, because of his power suit,
his superhero suit.
Because of his superhero suit, and he doesn't seem to have full control over it. And he's like only capable of inflicting pain and like You know what I mean? He's like
Not
not protect.
very reflexive.
Which is really interesting because he has this weird kind of aspiration to be a hero and to like protect people,
Right.
but he's clearly only capable of hurting.
So
people. He's only capable of injuring people.
Kakihara is played by Tadanobu Asano, who is
one of my favorite actors.
incredibly famous, like
Yeah.
in a million different not just Japanese features, but also American features as well. And then Ichi is played by Nao Omori, who I'm not necessarily the most familiar with. I think this is the only thing I can recognize.
I've seen him in other
from.
stuff, Helter Skelter, things like that.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was in that. But he is our proverbial killer.
Yeah.
He plays Tekken.
Yeah, he does play a lot of Tekken. Plays a lot of Tekken Tag Tournament, which is very
cool.
Very sentimental for me.
He's also a voyeur.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how
the opening sequence of this movie is one of the most notorious and insane like opening sequences in like the history of cinema.
Right.
The title cards of this movie literally rise out of someone's semen in a potted plant that's been ejaculated into while someone's been voyeuristically like watching something, a violent sexual act going on inside like an apartment
a
building.
prostitute being beat by her boyfriend or pimp or something like that, and then he physically assaults her and then sexually assaults her, and it's a real hard watch, but it's very
this
much
movie does this many
this entire
times,
movie is just a difficult watch, and there are points where like it calms down and it like lulls you into a sense of security,
and then blah, everybody's fucking exploding,
and you're like, oh my god, I totally forgot that these people are totally crazy people, and I'm watching a movie about crazy people living in this insane world.
Especially if you have a hard time with knives or with needles or like any of these things. This movie's gonna like send you over the edge. Like within the first 20 minutes, Kakihara is like trying to question someone, which by the way, he has no authority to do so. So he ends up getting kicked out of his branch of the Yakuza for doing this in the first place.
So
but
I think a little explanation of the setup there.
Sure.
So Ichi is this guy who was sent to kill. He actually is the guy who killed Boss Anjo. That's why it's called Ichi the Killer.
Right.
Because they're trying to find this guy. That's not like the whole mystery of it.
It's not really, that part's revealed pretty early.
Yeah.
It's more so the how that is the mystery.
And then like how are they gonna catch him?
Right.
And downstairs there is a van with 3 guys in there. And we learned that one of them is a heroin addict. The other guy is called Gigi, which just means old fart.
Yeah.
Or old guy sometimes, but not in a respectful way, like in an intentionally disrespectful way. And then there's a third guy who's sitting in the passenger seat that we later learn is this character named Ryu Long. Gigi is played by Shinya Tsukamoto, who...
Another pretty recognizable face, actually, for international Japanese cinema fans.
Right. And then Ryu Long is played by Kiho Hiko Shibukawa, who I'm not necessarily familiar with either. But Gigi is the guy who is manipulating Ichi. He's his handler. He's the guy who takes care of him. He's also a master hypnotist.
Right.
And he wants to steal Boss Anjo's money and kill Boss Anjo because he's got this own little secret gang going on. So when he sends Ichi to kill Boss Anjo and he leaves the room in essentially like a bloodbath. Ichi stumbles upon, the act of a woman being assaulted by this man, and because of the hypnotism and the implanted memories.
So Ichi is a very, very like volatile and like controllable individual.
Right.
And Gigi controls him with hypnosis by implanting false memories in his mind. And like any random situation may trigger what seems like a false memory to Ichi. So he'll like start thinking that he knows what's going on when he really basically never has any idea of what's going on.
Or like sexually violent acts also will trigger those implanted memories and then kind of freeze him up, and then all of a sudden he's like in that situation again.
Right.
Which is, it doesn't happen just once. It happens.
No, it happens like consistently, like frequently. Like things he'll think like, oh, this is like my friend from childhood that I didn't save, and then he'll like. Yeah, it's so twisted, so crazy. Like, and then like his response to situations like that won't be to like help or save that person. It will be to sexually assault them.
Yeah, or to be the one to inflict the pain.
Right,
at that point.
Exactly. It's like, you really wanted it to be me, didn't you? It's
he's so like
twisted.
conflicted about it, but he doesn't come to that realization until like I think a solid 2/3, maybe like 3/4.
But he's also not. He's insane. He's like not self-aware whatsoever.
Which it's kind of explained that he was a kid that had amnesia and then was found by Gigi.
Gigi, and then turned into this
crazy killer kind of guy.
Right. He's like a
right.
a rewritten kind of Guyver or Kamen Rider kind of character. It's really, really twisted.
Right. And this film I think it's interesting that, how you mentioned the writer it's a love story, which I can see an argument for that. I saw it more as like a neo-noir kind of film.
It has that
where
kind of vibe.
Also love stories work in that kind of metaphor because like noir is just a different exploration of love in a city that is a cesspool essentially.
Right.
So we have a character, Karen, who's played by Pauline Sun, who is the prostitute that Kakihara goes to for information. He's on.
She was one of Anjo's girls.
Yeah. And then she becomes Kakihara's girl.
Temporarily,
And then she kind of goes and tries to do her own thing. She kind of fills that femme fatale role, essentially.
Right.
And she has this unrequited love for Kakihara and then therefore acts out because of it. Because Kakihara is a straight up masochist. And he wanted her to just beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, there's this one sequence where they're like in like a dungeon and he's like trying to get her to inflict pain upon him, and she can't do it with enough bloodlust or like enough disdain or disregard for his safety or for his life for it to like really make him feel something. Like supposedly like Boss Anjo, who he's like totally in love with.
Yeah. Not in like a sexual sense, more of a
it's not sexual.
Well, yeah, okay. Not conventionally sexual.
Yeah, it's definitely not conventionally sexual, but it is. I would say it is at least somewhat sexual
in a masochist relationship to whatever like inflicts pain.
Right. But it's like a person who's like perfectly capable of like zero compassion.
Right.
And that's like what like gets Kakihara off. And Kakihara like has no. He's such a great character because he's not motivated by any of the things that like motivate like a normal person. He's not motivated
by greed, by like status,
but he's also not motivated in the negative ways that people are motivated by either, because he's not concerned with his own safety. He's not concerned with his own life. He's not concerned with like avoiding harm. Right. Like in fact, he enjoys harm.
He openly invites it.
He
is a disciple of pain.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
Like Pinhead.
He's like the Grim Reaper of pain.
Pinhead would love this guy. Like
right.
The Cenobites would love this guy.
The Cenobites would love this guy. Like, he has like one of the most famous images of the movie is he has like a Chelsea smile, which is like a scar that goes from here to here, and like little piercings right here. And Tadanobu Asano plays him like the coldest motherfucker who's like ever like graced like a cinema screen.
Cold, but yet like with a personality.
Oh yeah, he's actually very whimsical too. Yeah, true.
And these are
it's a lot of personality.
I find it interesting that Kakihara's group is kind of more of a flashy group of Yakuza guys.
Yeah, totally. One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is the part where they're doing kind of like a very like Oceans kind of like tough guy walk, like the whole group walking down the street.
And it's just Kakihara, and I think it's like his purple like trench coat or whatever. It's like bright purple.
Yeah, it's so absurd. They look like clowns. And one of the guys, so Kakihara has these giant needles that he uses as kind of his kind of iconic weapon. It's his signature weapon. And he stabs one of them through a guy's foot, and then it like gets stuck to a floorboard. So one of the guys in the group is walking with like a piece of floorboard stuck to his foot, like in their tough guy walk. Yeah. It's like so perfect. But Kakihara and Ichi are like this perfect kind of like combination of like they're like fire and ice, or maybe even like an unstoppable object and immovable object and an unstoppable force. It's like a perfect, and the whole movie kind of spirals you up for them to collide.
It's kind of this big wind up to everything, which I think an interesting point you make about the whole he gets spiked in the foot thing. This movie is a comedy.
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah, all of them really.
Both
of them are.
Ichi the Killer and Gozu have very strong overarching comedic elements, which
absolutely,
I would argue they're dark comedies.
Yeah, they're pretty dark.
They're really dark comedies.
Really dark.
Ichi definitely though has a interesting exploration of violence, because violence itself is not bad, but the people who inflict it are who maybe are bad. Because I mean,
it's very interesting. I mean, it also deals with like it treats life like it's such an absurd thing that even the preservation of it is like kind of irrelevant. Yeah. I don't know. It's just really funny. I mean, so like within like the first 20 minutes, like Kakihara is like trying to like find out information on what happened to Boss Anjo, and so he just finds this like random guy that I think we just assume he just doesn't like, and then he hangs him up by a giant.
Oh, so no, the reason he goes to, so you're talking about Suzuki, who's
Yeah,
played by, I have it written down somewhere, Suzumu Terajima. He's a Yakuza guy
From a rival family.
Kakihara tortures from
Yeah.
a different family,
Yeah.
right? Which is he's not supposed to do that.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
families take care of their own guys. If he
Yeah.
really did something wrong, they need to present it his boss with proof, and then his boss will determine the discipline.
Right.
Instead, Kakihara, after going to the club, the nightclub, which also that's kind of a trope of hard-boiled detective kind of films. If Kakihara is our detective, right?
Yeah, he kind of is.
And Ichi is our proverbial serial killer in this
Right.
case, and you're seeing this is like it's like 7 in a way,
Okay.
where Ichi is going down the basic. Okay, where the intel hole. Okay, I go to the
Kakihara.
Kakihara. He does the basic, gumshoe detective type stuff of going
Yeah.
down to where he could find intel. He finds his main girl that gives him all the intel he needs. He goes.
Sure.
Roughs up some people for information,
Right.
chases down leads and stuff like that. There's even a scene where they're like, "You're out of the group," and then he goes, reaches in his pocket, and then he pulls, and then he,
which by the way is beautiful. He goes to pull something out of his pocket, and all the other Yakuza, because they've kicked him out of like the overarching like group of the Yakuza that the Anjo gang is like a family member within, and everyone's like, "Oh!"
Like the guy he's sitting across jumps out of his seat
exactly.
and like gets behind another guy.
Yeah, exactly.
But all he does is he pulls out a pin, which is essentially the proverbial "turn in your badge" scene of every hard-boiled detective movie.
Totally.
And
he starts like a rogue Yakuza family.
Right.
Yeah.
And and then there's the one guy.
It's just really funny too because you can imagine like Kakihara being very useful as like an enforcer, as like a torturer, as like an agent or inflictor of pain. But he's a horrible gang leader.
Yeah. Also, he's clearly just like lashing out very heavily and desperately because he has no idea what happened to Boss Anjo.
Right.
Because this is a very very toxic and volatile relationship.
Yeah.
But another credence to the whole it's a cop movie thing is you have Kaneko, who is an ex-police officer. Kaneko is played by Hiroyuki Tanaka. He's the ex-cop that got fired for losing his gun,
which is so emasculating, by the way. And the way the movie deals with it is like so pathetic and like kind of funny.
Everyone shits on him for it.
Yeah. So like he's like, it's interesting, and both movies have a kind of character like this, like someone who seems maybe like kind of too soft for the world of the Yakuza.
Right.
And he has like this young son, and we're meant to like feel a certain amount of tenderness for him.
Who's clearly very, very impressionable.
Yeah. Well, and this, he basically keeps running into Ichi like outside of,
which makes sense because they live in the same area.
Yeah, they all live like basically in the same like what seems like basically the project.
Like a square. It's like a square block.
Yeah.
Or like a couple square blocks at most.
Right, but he keeps running into Ichi, and he even like he's shown to like he's like the one character who demonstrates a lot of compassion for other characters, and he like looks out for other people, and he like tries to be sensitive to other people's needs.
But then also he has anger issues clearly.
Yeah,
because he doesn't
because he's been humiliated.
Yeah, he doesn't.
He has like this chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, definitely, and lashes out at the wrong people at the wrong times.
Yeah.
But going back to your point of Kakihara picking up Suzuki off of Gigi's word to torture him.
That's what Gigi tells him to go.
Yeah,
because
if you remember.
But then he's like he hangs this guy up by a bunch of giant fish hooks.
Yeah,
and then pours hot oil over his back. And so when you see him again later, he's like in like a full body like cast.
He's literally wrapped head to toe
like a mummy,
in bandages.
Yeah,
and it's. I honestly
and like Kakihara doesn't.
He doesn't give a shit.
He doesn't give a shit.
At all.
He didn't even care that they didn't figure out anything from it.
The fact that he got no information, this guy knew nothing, wasn't even involved,
had nothing to do with it,
and he's permanently scarred because like Kakihara won. Like
Kakihara clearly just wanted to fucking hang somebody up by fish hooks.
Like
it's been something he'd been waiting to do.
I mean, if he has them, I guess, right? But then Suzuki has this whole thing of, I need to get revenge on Kakihara, which is fair.
Yeah.
Perfectly fair, absolutely justified.
Yeah.
And
he hung you up by fish hooks and tried to melt you. Yeah.
Right. So then the Ryulong guy who is working for GG shows up at his hospital room to assassinate him because they're looking for. They think he's involved for some reason, and they think I don't know.
I will say around like 2/3 into the movie, like some aspects, like because essentially like the entire movie that like Gigi's gang is like responsible for
Right.
it, and then it keeps kind of getting dragged out. So
And,
I
like,
actually think that this movie could cut probably
It
15
feels
to
like
20
it's
minutes
kind
somewhere.
of running in circles at some point, just so.
In
that way it can,
particular,
like,
so
kill
Kakihara
time.
has like two friends that are these twin detectives,
Jiro and Saburo, played by the same actor, Suzuki Matsuo.
and they're really weird.
Yeah. They
And
also
they're-
had apparently a third brother named Ichiro.
And they ate him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the movie it focuses on them too much. Like chasing after Ryu Long or whatever takes too long
Yeah.
too.
They don't
Like it just takes them too long to get to the conclusion, and
I
like
feel like it's very much they just wanted to add more
steps.
to it, or either pad for time, or just give it more personality. And for that,
And they are really weird, like the detectives are really weird.
right.
They wear these like weird
they have these,
ears
like-
and they sniff things. They literally smell
one's
things.
it's because he's a dog sniffing for clues. That's the whole
Okay,
thing. That's
yeah.
like kind of the joke, because like they're cops too. But they're bad.
But they
cops.
also don't dress as cops. They
Yeah.
dress in these like weird like
Matching
jumpsuits.
outfits.
Yeah.
The first time I think you see them, they're in a Canadian tuxedo. Which
Okay.
Is just all denim.
Well, and like at one point in time, doesn't one of them like wear like a doctor's
A frock. Or
yeah,
something like that?
yeah, like doctors, yeah, I don't know, but they're like weird, and like honestly, like a lot of the periphery characters aren't as fun or as interesting as
Yeah.
Kakihara and Ichi.
Takayama, who's played by Shun Sugata, who's like Kakihara's right hand man. All he does is yell, "Hey, go do it," or "Yes, sir,"
Yeah.
or Kakihara.
There's a
or-
lot of really really manly like R like Yakuza like R rolling. There's like it's a great movie for if you enjoy like silly like hyper masculine Japanese accents.
right, but
I think that I could take this movie though, and I could Topher Grace this movie.
you could tell for Grace this movie.
Yeah, I could edit like 20 minutes out of it and make it like a lot more fun. It would be called the Griffin's Fun Cut. And it's all the fun
Well, here's
scenes.
the thing. I think part of it you miss if you cut. Okay, so there's a lot of torture in Ichi the Killer.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Okay, if you cut out the twin cops,
Mm-hmm.
you miss out on one of the crazier torture scene, or the context for.
That's kind of true. I don't want to cut them out entirely. Just like not give them so much screen time.
They do chew up a lot of scenery. Like
Yeah.
the moment they're on screen,
Well-
it's so weird to have them and Kakihara on the screen at the same time when Kakihara is like the crazy guy.
Yeah. But it's like obvious why they are friends.
Yeah.
Because they're fucking idiots.
It's I can.
But I
see
will
why
say
they
that
get along.
you're right. I mean, like one of the crazier torture sequences. There's a lot of very famous like torture sequences in this movie. Some of them are self-inflicted. Kakihara cuts his own fucking tongue off.
Yeah. So Suzuki's boss, who is actually, do I have it written down somewhere? Yes, Funaki, who's played by Jun Kunimura, who's super famous. He's pissed, obviously. He's like, he wants retribution for something, so Kakihara cuts his own tongue off.
Yeah.
And
Instead, it's a play on the kind of classic like pinky cutting scene
Yeah.
from like Yakuza movies. Except he says he's got and it's so beautifully shot because he's got like this tongue ring, so he holds it by the tongue ring, and he talks about how much he loves sweets, and sweets are like the one like thing that he lets himself have, and then
So he'll
like,
take the section of the tongue that allows him to taste sweets.
yeah. And then also of course the tongue grows
I
back.
thought that was insane. One, because like, so a lot of the movie is done practically. The practical effects have aged gorgeously.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that tongue scene, so insanely well shot and
Yeah.
well done. That,
And the fish hooks and the nipple cutting.
yeah, and just all the poking and prodding and the needles and stuff like
Right.
that.
It's really really good.
The
There is bad CG. There's a lot of bad CG in the movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a lot of bad CG, but
There's a
where
couple.
it's used excessively, and then it's obvious, and it just has not aged well at all. Like there's a scene where a guy literally gets cut in half, like down the middle, and that has like aged like moldy cheese.
There's the opening sequence with the semen title cards. I read it's actually real semen. So what I want to know is who came in the potted plant. Whose job was it to be the stunt testes
or more?
Who was the stunt testes for that shot?
Oh my god. I will say that stylistically, Ichi the Killer has stuff like TV grain, and like slow mo, and then like light and color distortions or like additional distortions and stuff like that. Via sound and
it doesn't feel like they had like unlimited use of like amazing spaces, but like what they do shoot, like there are like many like very beautiful sequences in the movie, and like the costumes are great.
I think one of the most interesting shots is like kind of at the climax where Kakihara and Ichi finally confront each other on the rooftop.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I'm like, damn, this is just gorgeous to watch.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I'm mesmerized by like the cinematography in that scene.
Yeah.
Especially since it's such a heavy contrast, because that is such a artistically driven scene, which heavily contrasts with the more kind of guerrilla or grunge-esque filming style that was prolific throughout the rest of the film.
Right.
Especially since it is like, very voyeuristic a lot of the times, especially since like Gigi is placing cameras everywhere.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's literally voyeuristic in that case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Totally.
And
of course, Ichi is like constantly peeping and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very grimy movie. And what's interesting is like considering how grimy it is, like how like some of the performances like really shine actually.
Right.
Because the one who plays Karen is like really, really iconic. Kakihara is really iconic. Ichi's like really iconic. His blubbering, his like constant tears, nose running.
I'm sorry.
It's like just so.
It's like, and every time he does that, everyone who's like, he's saying that too is like, I don't care about your apologies.
Yeah.
What am I gonna do with your sorry?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they all go, "Are you crying?
Are you crying?" Yeah.
And Gigi is even like, "Yeah, he's kind of a crybaby. That's what makes it so easy."
Yeah. He's a big crybaby.
And so back to Gigi, the master of hypnotism and ultimate muscle himself, apparently.
Which you made such an interesting point when we were talking about this earlier. Like, explain to me what you explain to the audience what you explained to me earlier, because I thought that was really interesting. And I've watched this movie a lot of times, and I've never considered what you just said.
I think at a certain point in the film, maybe not in the beginning, but when we are exposed to like Gigi, we are hypnotized just like the characters in the film. Because Gigi also spends a fair amount of alone time individually with each of the main perspective characters or POV characters. Like Kakihara spends some time with Gigi, and then Ichi spends this infinite amount of time with Gigi. Karen spends time with Gigi. Takayama spends time with Gigi. Like everyone has talked to Gigi at some point. And we know this guy is a master of hypnotism. And throughout the film, there are these little bell chimes that you hear, which I think are keying us in that we are in the hypnotic trance already. Right? And not every time the bell chimes, you'll get a flash of the implanted memories. That's only really with Ichi and Karen.
Yeah.
Because I think those are the only two people that have the most implanted memories. In the case of everyone else, it's just a
possibility.
Yeah, it's just a more of a subtle illusion cast over reality for them. Like because when Kakihara and Ichi confront each other on the roof, that like bell chime is constantly there. Like it's over and over and over again. And because of that, it just seems like compounded with how when Gigi takes his clothes off, all of a sudden he's taller and jacked.
Yeah, he's like
in a bodybuilder. When we seen him roll up his sleeves earlier in the movie, and we seen what he looks like.
Yeah, he's like Zangief.
Yeah, he's built ridiculous. Like Zangief.
But he I've always back in the day when I would watch this, I would always just assume that like the movie is kind of dissolving. Like as it moves forward, it's becoming like a looser and looser grasp on the reality, and like moments like that are like more just like fragmented insanity. But when you point that out, that maybe in fact Gigi's not that big, and we're all just being hypnotized into thinking he's that big.
Right.
That's freaking hilarious and really interesting, and I'd never thought of that.
Because then like he calls Takayama a dumb gorilla.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly he's not insulting him for his size.
No.
Because he wouldn't do that. He's insulting him for his intelligence, meaning that he fell for his hypnotism so easily and so quickly.
Yeah.
And you know, I think just like you can't. There is no objective reality in the film necessarily, or the little objectivity you get, you can't really
Trust it.
even then, because either it's from Gigi's perspective or like someone who is adjacent to Gigi somehow, or like has come in contact. Because this guy's crazy with the hypnotism, man. This guy's like Mad Hatter levels of like mind control crazy. Who is he?
I don't know. It's really confusing, and like he's so overpowered compared to like all the other characters that like everybody else just by the end of it just is like a total pawn.
Right, and like I think it's implied that Gigi is the one that trained Ichi to be the killer.
Right.
Which just makes it so much more insane to think that there's just this guy walking around that could just do this.
But it's also like his hypnotism powers like imply that like this was maybe the most entertaining way for him to achieve his goals, but not the only way to have him achieve his goals.
Right. But and also we should just point out Gigi achieves his goals.
100%.
Like this guy wins.
Yeah, he wins.
Everyone else loses.
Yeah, everybody loses everything.
Well, actually, I guess
they either get their feet cut off, or their head chopped, or their throat slashed, or they fall off a building, or
or I guess I shouldn't say Gigi wins, because then there's that little kind of post-credit scene thing type
with
deal
the
older Takeshi.
The son of the guy of the cop who had lost his gun.
Yeah.
But what does that really imply?
I don't really know. That he got his revenge, that the cycle of violence continues. That
maybe.
I don't know. I think the movie does better without that post-credit scene. If that makes sense.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's interesting, but it does feel like a post-credit scene, even though it's not actually post-credits.
Right, because it just happened. It's just the next cut after like Gigi walks up to Kakihara's body that had just fallen essentially like from the roof.
Yeah.
Of a multi-story like apartment complex.
But like also like Kakihara like pierces his own eardrums.
Oh, right.
It's just so insane.
Ichi won't stop crying. And Kakihara is just so annoyed because he's trying to talk to the guy. And he's like, hey, man, can you stop that? I'm trying to. And then he just takes the needles and just
pierces his own eardrums.
So he goes deaf.
Yeah.
Which also probably.
It's really funny because.
Probably why he couldn't keep his balance.
But it's the blue balls. You know what I mean? Because he went there being like, finally, someone's going to really hurt me.
Right.
And then he starts crying. And he's like, "Are you kidding me? You're gonna cry?
This is what I've been.
This is what I came for. This is like the infinite like violence of Ichi.
Like, because he walked into Ichi is like a literal tornado of violence. Like,
yeah, the funny thing though is he's either crying or he's exploding into like just people's body parts are flying
and then
off.
The apartment is just or whatever room he is in essentially is
just a bloodbath.
Yeah. Ceiling coated in blood.
Yeah.
Body parts everywhere.
Yeah.
And Kakihara, like when he walks in and sees it it's just like
it's like a shrine.
Yeah, he's kind of like almost like amazed by it.
Yeah.
Like he's like more interested now, if that makes sense. But I definitely think overall the movie kind of just starts to fizzle out towards the end. A little bit.
I just wish that it got to where it gets, because I actually think the ending is really entertaining and interesting again, and I think it just lollygags a little bit there.
The movie itself, like for like the first like 3/4 or 4/5 of it, it's like a sock in the jaw, a gut punch, like you just got kicked in the head because you fell to the ground. Then all of a sudden now they're just like kind of poking you with a stick at the end.
And you're kind of like waiting for them to like get on
serious
with it.
again or whatever.
Especially because there is like a big lull, like, and like, you know, like the violence is part of the entertainment. I mean, it's like highly aestheticized, like torture and violence.
Would you call it torture porn?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely like a huge portion of the entertainment value of the movie. If you can't it gives you like this weird kind of like macro view on, you know, it's like you're watching people get plucked apart the way that like little kids like pluck the wings off of ants.
Yeah.
You know?
Like everyone is a like messed up G.I. Joe or Barbie.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're just everything is a plaything. And it's not just like us saying that. That's like a direct phrasing that is used in the movie, I think, at some point by a couple characters, where it's just like, you know, they're referred to as playthings or objects.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of dehumanization that goes on across not just Ichi the Killer, but Gozu as well. But definitely Ichi the Killer is overt and meant in trying to dehumanize.
And it's also just like one of the most violent movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
especially in like the depictions of like the physical
Well, I mean,
acts that are not implied.
You wanna go over how many places you're not allowed to watch this film or whatever?
Yeah, supposedly it's been banned in Germany, Malaysia, a bunch of. It's just been banned more places than you can.
I think
what I thought was really funny was when they brought it to Toronto and Stockholm, the various international film festivals,
Right.
they handed out
barf bags.
Which is like genius, absolutely genius. Because the best part about that is that like it really prepares you for like what's about to happen,
Right.
and it sets the tone in a very funny, entertaining way. That's the intertextuality that I'm actually very down with.
Well, I mean, understandable, and I would have been grateful because personally, like, there are moments of the film that I was
That
watching.
you find very difficult to watch.
Yeah, especially for me personally, like, I have a thing with needles. It's more of like a phobia type thing, right? So seeing him just fucking, oh my god, run needles through like a guy's cheek and then like kind of stir it around, I was losing my freaking mind trying to like keep my skin from crawling.
Yeah. Well, you can definitely see like the influence this movie may have had on things like the Saw series,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
or Hostel.
Right.
Like the horror market at the time, like directly after this came out, it was massively influential.
And it definitely, it's like you say.
This
like,
movie though is actually more blithe with it than those
Right.
movies are.
I think those movies.
Those movies actually treat those
Rev-
act like they're kind of tragic, and this movie kind of treats it like it's a little like fucked up, but not tragic per se.
I would say those movies kind of revel in it more a little bit too.
You think so?
Like you're like in kind of supposed to enjoy it, whereas Ichi
Maybe.
the Killer is this is just violence. How are you gonna respond to it? I think
It's a little more neutral.
Like Ichi the Killer,
But they're both going for shock value.
yeah,
for sure.
definitely going for shock value. But I definitely think Ichi the Killer is just a more neutral kind of platter of violence. It's definitely asking us as an audience to come to conclusions about violence.
And like the cycles of violence and like the nature, like violent nature of
Right.
of
Human
of
psychology.
and human instinct. Yeah.
And human depravity and stuff like that. It's like, where do you personally draw the moral line?
Mm.
And what violence in the film itself is justified?
I don't think the movie. The funny thing is, like, the movie doesn't try to.
Right. The movie doesn't, but you
Like
as,
Kakihara doesn't even.
right. But you as the audience, to an extent, have to because you're engaging in it. If you get the kind of the point I'm trying to get at.
For sure.
But I mean, other than like, if you're interested in Ichi the Killer, go check it out. I don't have much else to say other than
I love it, but I'm done talking about Gozu.
yeah,
for
I
sure.
would love to
Let's
move on to Gozu now. So moving on to the second movie, Gozu,
In 2003.
2003. You know,
This was a follow-up from the same director, same writer. Writer actually shows up in this one as well. Actually, he plays the manager of the restaurant.
right? Which
This movie though it's harder to describe what the plot of this movie is.
I can,
It does have one,
I can
but it's very weird.
I can kind of sum it up pretty
Sure,
easily.
give it a shot.
So here, actually, let me just look at my notes really quick. So you have this guy named Ozaki who's played by Sho Aikawa, and he is a Yakuza enforcer, and he works for this one boss. I don't know if he's named. I just have him written as the boss, who's played by Renji Ichibashi. And basically, they're just hanging out, and I think they're watching like this tape or something in their
I don't know why
restaurant.
it's really
but-
weird. The opening is really
Yeah.
weird because you can't hear what anyone's saying over like the VHS burn and buzz that's going on.
Also, I think the speech itself is meant to be distorted.
Yeah.
Like, so Ozaki just goes crazy in the cafe.
Yeah, he's just going. He's just losing his mind. He's another capo. It's a very similar kind of
Right.
character to Kakihara. It's like a yakuza capo who's losing his fucking marbles.
right, or just like no longer in control.
Yeah.
And Ozaki is crazy. Is so out of his marbles at this point where there was just a lady with her dog outside of the cafe that these guys were meeting at, and he goes to the boss. It's like, boss, that dog out there, that's a Yakuza attack dog. It's been trained to kill Yakuza members. I know this. And then the boss is like, oh, okay.
Well, the best part about it is I feel like he opens by saying everything I'm about to tell you
is a joke.
is a joke.
Which is so
So
weird.
confusing.
It's so such a strange.
But
precedent
also,
to
it's such
set,
a great, such a perfect opening line to this movie.
right? Because then, is this all just a sick joke? Because
Everything about this movie is a sick joke.
Okay, because again, this is a comedy. This movie is a comedy.
It's absolutely
this
a
is through and through.
comedy.
It's just
100% a comedy.
a dark comedy.
It's a very,
Like,
very, very
this
dark,
has-
very confusing, weird, very weird
Like
comedy.
both movies have insane comedic timing.
Yeah.
This one has the most like on like beat comedic timing that I like absolutely recognizably comedic.
Absolutely.
And
But what he does with the dog is hilarious, and I swear that the scene where
okay, so I feel so bad saying this, but when he walked outside and just picked it up and then immediately touchdown slammed it, I like audibly like laughed.
yeah, it's really funny, and then he's like jumping on it and stomping it. He starts spinning it around,
He
which
picks
I
it- he
swear I think
throws
that
it
scene
at the-
from
like someone or something like that. It lands on the ground, then grabs it by the leash and starts swinging it around.
I swear that scene from Everything Everywhere All at Once is a reference to this scene.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Like there's a woman who in Everything Everywhere All at Once, she was one of the people who was on SNL and stuff like that. I can't remember what the actress's name, but she like spins a dog like it's like a mace, like it's a
Right.
ball and chain mace, and she like kicks it at people, and it's the very same energy, very same vibe as Ozaki killing the
Right.
dog in front of the
And then
Yakuza
Ozaki
cafe.
throws the dog straight at the window.
And then the blood runs down the window, and he's just staring.
Stares. And you're just like, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
Well, he's perfect, but he's not in the movie very long. It's funny because he's
he
he's
has
on the
very
poster.
limited scenes, and you
Yeah.
don't see him in like the concurrent state. I should
Yeah,
say.
you mostly see him in flashbacks. Yeah.
Right. And so the main character, I would argue, is Minami, who's played by Yuta Sone. He's Ozaki's younger or whatever.
But he's clearly someone who has like a tremendous amount of like affection for Ozaki.
Yeah. Affection, respect, admiration. Like Ozaki's is Aniki.
Yeah, his older brother.
Aniki.
Aniki.
And
Which they use that word very liberally in the Yakuza world, I guess, at least according to these movies.
yeah. I mean I think it like literally means brother, but that's more of just like a bro kind
Yeah.
of term.
They say it a lot in this movie, and they have a really tight bond.
Okay,
and
they have a strangely tight bond.
it's very strange. They know a lot of like Ozaki knows a lot of weird things about him.
well, not
Like he knows that he got circumcised, and they talk
not
about his
just
circumcision a lot.
He knows what his dick looks like circumcised.
Yeah.
Because Ozaki goes, so you get the circumcision? How'd that go well? And he's like, yeah.
He's like, show me.
Show me. And he's like, if you don't show me
Okay.
right now, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the hell is wrong with this guy? And he's
really,
and
really
Minami's
confusing.
driving.
Yeah, he's driving while doing this, and I think they shot this scene. It doesn't seem to be a green screen. Like it seems like they actually
No, I
shot this
think
scene.
I think this was before, or maybe like around the time of the major crackdowns and Japanese traffic laws and stuff like that. Because little fun.
I mean, he doesn't actually whip it out, but it does. They shoot it like, but it seems like they're driving on a real street.
right. So like a little fun fact, early like Heisei cinema in Japan, traffic laws looser, right?
Okay.
But there's like a definite transition where like traffic laws and enforcement of traffic laws get stricter and stricter and stricter throughout the course of Japanese filmmaking. So by the time when you enter towards the end of Heisei and the current standard of era film, which is Reiwa, like especially in Kamen Rider, you don't have a lot of motorcycle shots where they're just riding on a motorcycle or anything because technically the suit is not like safety regulation or anything.
Oh.
And it's the same deal with like cars because like if you have a camera mounted to a car, it's a hazard because like it's not properly like fastened or whatever and stuff like that.
Oh.
So,
okay.
like-
I hadn't heard of that. That's very interesting.
Like
So there's less driving footage
Yeah.
in modern Japanese cinema.
yeah,
For reasons.
yeah.
Okay.
It's purely because of traffic laws and traffic enforcement.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, which I think is cool because then like this.
Well, and speaking of cameras attached, there is a bit of driving in this movie, and what I noticed is there's a couple shots stolen from Burst City.
Really
There's a couple of shots in particular while he's driving around
like
where
composition or
those shots at the beginning of Burst City,
Uh-huh.
those time lapses,
Right.
like going down the street, like this movie does that.
Ooh. Okay, I think that's very interesting because so I didn't write this down, but doing like a little bit of wiki and stuff like that, looking at like who's in the cast. I did see some names that were attached to Gozu.
Okay.
That under their credits also had Burst City attached to them.
Okay. Wow.
So I think maybe there is a definite overlap of that like kind of indie cinema like landscape. In Japan,
I can
which
imagine.
I wouldn't imagine it.
Well, Burst City, I have to imagine,
Right.
is influential on all of these later
Also,
creators.
the area in which it was shot, like that,
Kinda looks like Burst City.
Yeah, like that suburby kind of thing.
Well, and like the
rural
like
area,
and like the place where they go to like crunch the car, like
Yeah.
and like there's even like sequences in this where people are walking through dumps,
right? The junkyards,
Junkyards,
and shit like that,
which is very Burst City.
yeah. And
I thought that was super interesting. We were like finding a lot of intertextuality between
also,
these different
both,
projects.
Both Burst City and this movie have American cars.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They I actually thought that the car in this it's a Mustang and it looks great. It's so sick.
It's
It's
this
so
really
cool.
really nice like dark green kind of color. It's not like it's almost black, but not entirely. If that makes
I
sense.
thought it was blue. Well, maybe
Or maybe it's just the version I want. Well, actually, where did you watch Gozu?
I watched it on a really cool website. Shout out to whoever runs this website. It's called effedupmovies.com.
Oh my god. That's where I Googled.
Really? Yeah.
That's what I Googled. That's where I saw it too.
Shout out to Effed Up Movies. You guys are running a good website. I like what you're doing.
So, but the basic story is the boss tells Minami, you got to kill Ozaki. He's too much of a liability for the Yakuza at this point. So you got to get rid of him. So Minami drives out to the middle of nowhere to essentially kill his best friend or his brother.
Yeah, his brother. And the best part about it is that Ozaki tells him, he's like, I'm letting you in on a little secret. Boss has got to go. So they're like both planning on killing one another or replacing one another. But Ozaki is insane.
Yeah.
So.
Or is he just playing insane?
Or is he? I don't know. He's acting pretty crazy. Like, I don't know. Like,
it's a very crazy film in general.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
To an extent.
Crazy like a fox.
Like, after talking to you about it a little bit, I think part of it is almost all according to Ozaki's plan.
Yeah, maybe. There is an element where I felt like that way. Because here's the thing. This is another movie. Had it on DVD back in the day. I've watched it a bunch of times. I've never actually paid all the way attention. This is like Burst City. I've never paid, until this time, I have never paid attention all the way through this movie.
I felt like there were certain sections where I didn't need to pay attention as much as Burst City, just because Burst City just had so much stuff going on. But the sections that I had to force myself to pay attention were the very, very slow bits.
Like the horror style moments.
Like,
I feel
not
like.
even the horror style. The horror style moments were interesting. It's the non-horror more. They're trying to be This is trying to be Twin Peaks so bad.
I can't really disprove that.
It wants to be Twin Peaks so bad.
There is a certain log lady vibe to a lot of the characters in this movie. We should get into the other characters though, because the other characters are really funny and weird.
So there's he winds up in Minami drives into the middle of like the rural Japan with Ozaki.
Nagoya, which I think is very interesting. This is the worst commercial for Nagoya tourism I've ever seen. It's the least glamorous, saddest depiction of a town in Japan I've ever witnessed.
I think the interesting part is the moment he tries to turn back is when the supernatural elements start occurring. Like the road that they came on gets swept away by a sudden river that just showed up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Or like the weird lady at the bridge that just stopped her car randomly, and then Ozaki thinks that like that's a murderer or an assassin sent to kill them or something like that.
His seriousness is so funny and so charming.
Man.
And like they could not have found like a more sweet and dopier looking person for him to like pull a gun on.
Right.
So he thinks that there's an assassin after him, and he like pulls up a gun like to this person. He's gonna shoot the person driving this car, and then Minami like tackles him to like stop him from doing it. And it's like the sweetest, most like dopiest, like most lovable looking person you've ever
like,
seen.
It just looks like an old lady.
Yeah, she's just so sweet. And he's like, "Get the fuck out of here! This guy's gonna fucking kill you."
And then there's the Minami drives into this like suburby town and stops in a cafe to get some coffee. They gave him a free pudding. And everyone in the cafe, I think, is a cross-dresser.
All the people running it seem to be either trans or something like that. Yeah. And there's some really weird customers there.
There's with one guy on the phone that is just saying the same two phrases over.
And he does that, and then talks about that conversation for the rest of the movie.
All these characters show back up throughout the course of the film because, like in Twin Peaks, this guy is just kind of stuck here.
Yeah. Well, it's Nagoya. That's what's crazy about it. It's all Nagoya. I don't know why. I don't know what Miike and Sato have. What kind of axe that grind they have to because they clearly think Nagoya is the most boring, repetitive place on earth.
So he eats this free pudding that everyone's trying to offer him free stuff. That's like a weird thing that I noticed and I picked up on. Is everyone's trying to offer.
And then he bombs. He bombs the chicken pudding or whatever.
That like. And
then they forced him to have because he ordered coffee and he was mad that they gave him it to him, but then he ate it and then he pukes. And then everyone. And then Ozaki goes missing.
Right, and then he's just searching the town for
Ozaki.
And
he spends like what feels like most of the half of the next half of the movie looking for Ozaki.
Which I think it's just so boring and so long. Like he meets this homeless guy that apparently has like alopecia, I guess, because he said the pigment on half my face is incorrect, but he's clearly just like that
wearing makeup.
Or that. Have you seen that one James Bond movie?
I know, but the movie does this a bunch of times where a character will say or do something, and then the movie will demonstrate that it's fake.
Right.
So like he's like, oh, I don't have pigment on this part of his face, and then the movie zooms in on the cracked makeup.
Right.
And then there's another part where they talk to an American woman, and she's just like staring. And supposedly this is actually a production gaffe, and they just thought it was funny and they included it, but. But they're talking to this American woman and she's speaking like the most broken Japanese possible, and then the camera moves 180, breaks the 180 rule to show the cards that she's reading it off of, like scrawled across the wall.
So there's a scene where Minami is doing his little investigation, trying to find Ozaki, and he walks into like a general store and is talking to the owner, and then he starts talking to the owner's wife, who's American.
Right.
And like you said, she doesn't speak Japanese.
No, not at all.
And so they had these cue cards written in English, but they were romanized Japanese words.
Yeah, it's Romaji.
And she still couldn't read it properly.
And so I think that they just thought it was funny and charming, so they just show the title cards. So they the movie breaks the fourth wall basically.
Which I think
at least twice, to be honest.
That's also what's on the VHS at the beginning that they're watching in the cafe.
Really? That's what they're watching?
I think
is her
reading
that? Oh,
and that's what the cue cards are. Because I was trying to read it because it was
movie's in like a crazy loop.
It was in English.
Yeah.
Right? And I was trying to read it. I'm like, those aren't English words. And I didn't understand the context for it until
you get to that moment.
And I'm like, oh. That was just
time is a flat circle.
What is it? Space is warped and time is bendable.
Yeah.
So
I like the lady that runs the inn though. She's my favorite log lady.
Yeah.
So there's this woman who runs the inn that he starts staying at, and she and her brother run the inn.
And she's obsessed with breast milk.
They bottle it and they sell it. It seems to be.
Yeah. So she's she's older lady.
She like on some Obachan vibes.
Comes to Minami while he's taking a bath.
Well, no, she tells him to take a bath. She tells him that dinner's gonna take a long time and that you should go take a bath.
First, I think it was so funny where she's like, "Oh, here, you can take a look at our menu," and then immediately goes, "Oh, actually, our menu is very limited today due to the lack of ingredients, so we only have B set. Is B set fine with you?"
And then he just says that's fine.
Yeah.
And this place is designed to look very creepy. Like the movie makes it look really weird and creepy. It's like some of the horror vibes of the movie are just the sequences that take place at this like old ryokan, and I would never have agreed to a mystery set from like Mystery Teishoku from this place. Hell fucking no.
And also, when the food finally comes, I think it's so funny because it's just a little bit of tempura, some vegetables,
like a tofu soup,
and then not even a tofu soup. It's just 2 whole blocks of tofu, unseasoned tofu.
It's true.
He
eats all of it too, and he's like, "How come there's enough for 2 people?" And they're like, "That's just how it comes."
That's just how it comes. So big surprise. I'm Korean. I'm Asian. So, tofu is a big part of my diet growing up. When I tell you unseasoned tofu like that is just straight up gross, it's like there's no flavor to it. It's just, and it's cold too.
Yeah, of course.
And it's just sitting in a pool of water, and it's just, you're waiting. It just gets more lukewarm over time.
Yeah, I'm actually getting this. My stomach's turning just thinking about it, to be honest.
Like, don't get me wrong, I love tofu. But
I like tofu too.
But served that way?
Soon tofu rules.
Like, served that way, that's like the worst way to serve tofu.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. But so anyway, she tells him that the meal's going to take a long time. She tells him to go take a bath. So he goes and takes a bath, and she's like, there's a rubber tree. It's the pride of our ryokan. And so he goes and he's taking a bath, and then she shows up and she's like, hey, do you want me to wash your back? And he's like, no, go away.
Yeah, and she's standing outside the door.
And she comes in anyway.
And you were like, okay.
And people in this movie are obsessed with his penis. By the way, Ozaki is like interested in his penis. This lady, the old lady's interested in his penis. She tells him it's really nice, and he shouldn't hide it from her.
Okay, so I think this is an interesting parallel and an interesting dichotomy that the movie is making because the boss has erectile dysfunction.
It's conditional, but yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
He needs.
He can get it up. He's depicted as having a lot of sex. It's just he has to put a ladle up his butt. And that's how he dies.
What the fuck did you make me watch, man? Jeez. Ugh.
That's how you know it's good.
So in order for the boss to get an erection, he needs to stick a ladle up his ass.
Yeah, and he has a selection of them.
He has a collection of ladles, each of them labeled differently in like these little volcano arrangements that he has, like a trophy section essentially.
Right. Yeah.
But Minami has the natural big schlong or whatever.
Supposedly, everybody likes it. Everybody thinks it's really cool. And then the lady really wants him to drink her milk.
She's like,
and so she starts lactating like all over like the bath area, and he jumps in the bath to get away from her. And then
he even says no means no.
Yeah, he says no means no. I don't know. It's really funny. Like at another point too, it just turns out that Ozaki, who he's been looking for this entire time, has just been staying upstairs from him.
Right, this entire time,
and they just never told him.
And
he asked him, "Did anybody stay here?" And he's like, "Well, nobody stayed here. We only had the one room." And he's like, "You sure nobody else stayed here?" Like, "Okay, somebody else stayed here." It's like, what the fuck?
It's like I've been looking, and at that point, they already know he's looking for like Ozaki.
I think so.
Because
yeah.
that's
because they do this whole thing where she really wants her brother to like channel a spirit, so that they can ask the spirit. But the funny thing is that
nothing happens. You hear a baby crying.
Yeah, there's a lot of babies crying because they play the baby crying later when Ozaki births himself too.
Okay, so that's like a whole.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
We'll get that in a minute. But yeah, so she tells the innkeeper tells Minami that her brother's like a
spirit.
He's like a channel. He's a channeler, right? And so she starts like chanting these hymns. They start chanting these hymns, and she starts whipping and beating her brother. And her brother's like,
"I can't do it! I can't do it!
I can't do it! Stop!" He's like bleeding everywhere, and he's like, "Make her stop!"
And then Minami's like, "Hey, maybe you should stop." And then she starts whipping him.
Yeah, well, and then she keeps whipping him, and she chases her brother out to like another room where she just keeps whipping him. And she's like, the motto of our hotel is that we serve our customers the best we can." It's like totally unhinged.
It's so strange.
It's so strange.
And then there's this. Oh my god! There's one scene where they're like praying to. Or they're saying prayers to like a poster or something like that, and it's to
a cow-headed god.
No, it's Gozu.
Gozu,
which is I thought that's what the movie was gonna be about, not this hunky-dory Twin Peaks wannabe vignette like film or whatever. Because every time Minami goes into the suburb, it is the most boring shit I've ever fucking seen. If I want to watch Twin Peaks, I will just go and watch Twin Peaks. I don't want to watch.
I feel like Japanese Twin Peaks is pretty fun. That's my take.
I'm not saying it can't be fun, but
that's my
this
take.
this version
Japanese Twin Peaks
version of Japanese
is fun.
This version of Japanese Twin Peaks. Everyone at the cafe is kind of boring. The homeless guy is kind of funny a little bit, but
I think he's really funny. Like at one point in time, like a common recurring theme in this is that people just keep guilting one another. Everyone's just guilting everyone like all the time. So like the old lady who runs the hotel guilts him for like not like accepting his like backwashing and like
her sexual advances.
Yeah, her sexual advances. She's like, that's what everyone says. And then the homeless guy that he works with, who I think is from like the weird other gang that his gang.
Right. There is a gang there.
Yes, but it's only two people that we meet. And one of them is homeless, and the homeless guy also is like another one of the worst gang members you've ever met. Because he meets the mean guys from high school, and they intimidate him, so he like has to eat lunch with them.
Right. And
it's
so
really weird. It's really weird. But then like he takes him to the hotel, and he's like, if I'm gonna help you, we're gonna do this in my speed, so we're gonna wait until tomorrow.
Actually, before that, he takes him to his boss, who challenged Minami to a game of riddles for him to change a flat tire.
Yeah.
Which is like,
well, no, because they said that he was gonna take something that he really valued, but then he just wins, so you never find out what they were gonna take.
I guess, but So
stakes are kind of low
so
on
the
that
homeless
one.
guy with in half white face takes him to the motel or the inn, and then he just sits outside of his room and he's like, "Please, I'm begging you."
Let me stay here. Let me stay the night here with you. And he's like, no, I won't. I can't sleep with another person sleeping in the room. And he's like, I won't bother you. And he's like, no, you can't stay here. And he's like, you're really mean.
And then the next time they see each other, he just
He's
constantly.
injured.
Yeah.
He's injured, and he's like, I got injured because you wouldn't let me stay with you last night.
But I felt like I couldn't go anywhere because something bad was gonna happen. And nothing bad happened. Like nothing happened.
This is so fucking weird.
Like the weirdest thing that happened that night was there was a light on the ceiling that was yeah.
Shaped like a breast.
Yes, thank you.
And it
I don't know
leaks
why I
milk.
couldn't get
But
that
everything
out.
at the hotel leaks milk. Her mailbox leaks milk.
Oh my
The ceiling
God.
leaks milk. Everything leaks milk here.
The-
I don't know what the milk metaphor means, but
well,
Miike, you got
the
it.
most interesting part again is the whole Gozu thing, where it's the cow-headed god, or Gozu I think just means
When
cowhead.
he gets molested by the cow-headed god at some point.
Right, and I think it's because he drank the milk. Because in their little prayer, they say those who make the milk are healthier than the ones who drink it, which I think is such an interesting and strange prayer. And because remember, he drank the morning glass of milk, which I would not have.
Who would have? Gross.
I would not have done that.
Gross.
And
From
then
the milk lady?
And then there's that one scene where she's bottling the milk.
Yeah, from her own breast.
And then following that, there's a scene where the brother is drinking from her own breast while he's having the Gozu dream where the cowhead licks him. And then the cowhead starts to ooze milk from its mouth too. And you're just like, why?
What's funny is this movie seemed like it didn't really have much of a budget, but there are a couple shots where I'm like,
The cowhead is so well
because
done.
that head's pretty impressive.
The cowhead is so well done.
Yeah. Cowhead's pretty impressive.
And like I said, that's the most interesting part of the movie. That's the horror aspect. If the movie was just about an inn and this is crazy cult,
but it isn't, because they move on from there. Because Ozaki eventually gets killed.
yeah,
They find Ozaki, and so, like the rival gang maybe finds him. I can't really figure out who those people are at the junkyard.
He winds up in a car
And they squish him.
and they turn him into a skin suit.
They turn him into a skin suit, and they like go through like they have like this. It's like racks and racks of skin suits,
Right.
and they find his. And they're like, oh yeah, see, and then they point to his penis, and they're like, see, he's dead. And then a female version of Ozaki just shows up.
Female Ozaki or Femme Ozaki shows up waiting in Minami's car, just like already there, and she's played by Kimika Yoshino, and
She rules. Big fan. I've never heard of her before. Never seen her anything else. She's great.
I don't know how that works out. How Ozaki survived getting flattened in a trash compactor.
Yeah, but now he's a girl.
and now he's a woman.
And she has all of his memories, but she's all of a sudden she's not crazy anymore.
But just
And
super horny.
she's super horny. She's trying to bang everybody, and then later you find out that while having sex, so Minami kills the overboss, and because he was gonna have sex with female Ozaki, but he wants to have sex with female Ozaki, but she tried to have sex with him before, and he wouldn't do it. And he had a real Shinji moment where she was sleeping and he was peeping.
Oh my fucking god.
He like Shinji'd over there and was like being a creep.
So-
but then she's like, if you wanted to have sex, you have to wake me up.
It's such a complicated fucking little. So female Ozaki hits him with the circumcision story that we.
Yeah, she knows all this weird stuff about him,
And
even maybe
then
things we hadn't heard
The
at that
first
point.
stop they make, she immediately tries to go get
Have sex with a truck driver.
right, and then they stop at a motel, and then she's like, "Oh, you wanna bang? You wanna have sex?" And then he's like, "No, I can't do this. Sorry."
Yeah, he can't do it.
And she's like, "I waited up all night for you." And he takes her back to headquarters, and the boss is immediately like, "Dang, I'm gonna try and bang this."
Well, and
girl."
he's like demonstrated to be like a huge hornball. Like Ozaki's main criticism of him earlier in the movie, it actually seemed like a pretty legitimate one.
Right.
Was this guy's gonna fucking bury our entire organization because all he cares about is getting laid.
right. What does he do immediately?
He tries to bang female Ozaki.
Right, and
He-
he gets all the way to getting her up to his, flat or whatever.
Yeah, his like kind of fancy apartment, which very much reminded me of the apartment from Audition, which is a great movie. Hopefully we get to talk about that one someday.
Then Minami does this whole thing with a garden hose where he tries to bust into the window and then nearly kills himself. And then
Which is very similar to Kakihara balancing on the railing on the stairway, by the way. Very, very similar.
And then his boss pulls him in. Then starts to beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, he hits him with like an ashtray like twice, and so
Right.
he's bleeding everywhere all of his face. But then Minami ends up managing to kill him by pushing him over. He punches him in the face, and then he falls with the ladle sticking out of his butt, and then he impales himself on the ladle.
Right.
And then
He
broken.
He keels over, and then Minami takes the broken lamp.
Yeah, that they knocked over, and then he electrocutes him
And takes the little part of the lamp that had the broken light bulb, and then just like kind of taps him at the end of the.
It electrocutes him through his anal probe, and then he and Fima Ozaki rush home to bang, and they start having sex. But then his penis is being gripped.
First she goes, "Wow, that's impressive."
Yeah, she's impressed by his penis again.
Like no one cannot compliment him.
Everybody loves this guy's wiener. But anyways, so they're going to have sex, and he's like, inserting, and they're being very slow about it. I guess maybe because she's a day old. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because she's just born.
And then she has teeth.
You think it's a vagina dentata thing? I don't think it is. I think it's a male Ozaki's hand.
Is it his hand?
I think it's male Ozaki's hand.
God.
So male Ozaki is being like rebirthed through this act.
Through his female Ozaki.
Yeah. Female Ozaki is giving birth
to him
to a fully grown male Ozaki. And he's gripping onto his penis, and that's why...
Like kind of using it as a tether almost.
Yeah, and then his hand comes out holding onto him, and he's trying to use the penis to anchor himself out of her womb.
And then when he finally pops out...
It's the best thing ever, because it's a cork popping sound, and then he slides across the floor into the corner.
And she's all shriveled up and like a husk now.
Yeah, she's like dead.
But then like there's a quick line. It's like, oh, we just stuck her in the hot tub and she was fine.
Yeah, they threw her in the bathtub and she was just okay. And then they just lived happily ever after as a throuple.
Yeah, the last scene, it literally ends on like a still image of them walking, like all of them arm in arm.
Yeah, they like look kind of like cool and like happy, happily ever after. It's like the most Takashi Miike the closest Takashi Miike ever gets to a happily ever after.
Right. I think a very good or interesting kind of piece of attention to detail, I guess, that they did in the film, especially in Gozu, is when we see Minami start to bang female Ozaki, we see his back tattoo, and it's like only semi-complete.
Yeah,
which is
just the outline.
It's barely the outline, I would say, because like there's thicker like line work on certain areas of the tattoo, which clearly, which clearly just implies that like this guy's like super young in the organization,
or just not. Yeah, he's recent. Maybe he's not young, but he's young
like
to the organization.
Yeah, young to the organization is
right. He's recent to the organization. What I think is funny is imagining that all of this was Ozaki's plan all along.
Yeah, that's like also one of my questions is like, did Ozaki plan all of this all along? Because like the female Ozaki just wanted to get banged. And if that meant that he was going to be reincarnated.
Yeah, if she needed to have sex for Ozaki to be reborn again.
And her plan was
his
to
plan,
kill the boss regardless.
Right. And then
Ozaki's plan was to kill the boss.
Right.
Would he have used the boss's dick?
To anchor himself out and then kill the boss and then he gets to be the boss? Because that's what it seems like at the end. Ozaki's the boss and then they're all happily ever after.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe Ozaki was right. Maybe that dog was trained to kill them.
Maybe
that lady was really an assassin and he scared her off.
Was that all a ploy so that way Ozaki can go to where he needed to go see Gozu so that way he can get the breast milk to be reincarnated in his female self so that way he can give birth to himself as a woman?
This movie was supposed to be straight to DVD and it got and because we're asking these questions right now are the exact reason are exactly why it got a theatrical release. Good job, Takashi Miike. This guy one time directed 11 projects in a single year.
I'm not surprised.
When did he sleep? Not at all. That's how you come up with this stuff. If you don't sleep long enough, this is what you come up with.
This is a movie made of a man who's having like delusions from spoiled breast milk or something like that. I don't know what the deal is. Here's the thing. I really enjoyed a lot of this movie.
But they're both too long.
But yeah, they
both
should
too
not
long.
be 2 hours.
Yeah, they're both about 2 hours, and it's a little too long.
I think that's very
for
excessive.
just like what level of like sometimes it just feels like scenes drag a little bit,
especially in Gozu. It feels so slow in some scenes, and I'm just like, can you just
I could overgrace both of these.
Can you just like walk like a little bit faster, or can we? We don't need 20 seconds of a reaction shot. We don't need to linger on someone's face for that long.
And like I do feel like though that so part of what the movie's maybe going for is like there's like a banality to like the weirdness, and there's like, and I get that, but it overstays its welcome, and they do it. They try it too many times, and they'll like for instance the conversation that you hate about how hot the weather was yesterday, which by the way, like by the end of the movie they're talking about a sate, so they're talking about 2 days ago.
Right.
They're like still arguing about the weather.
It's still the conversation about the fucking weather though. It's the same conversation that they're referencing. They haven't moved on at all. Is that all that? It's just that boring there. It was a hot day. All I wore was a shirt. Yes, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying it was a hot day yesterday. All I wore was a shirt. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it was a hot day 2 days ago.
My initial vibe about this movie was that it's about the horrors of being the only person who knows what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
Because he's the only person who reacts with any incredulity to like all the insane things that are going on around him. Everyone's acting really weird. It's like on some Silent Hill logic, you know?
Yeah.
Where everything is weird and only one person thinks so.
Silent Hill 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where is it
like
Ashley, right?
No, that's 3.
Is it 3?
But like there's like this vibe where he's walking around this creepy like podunk town. Although Nagoya, I don't even think it's even that podunk. I'm not really sure the vibe.
It's not.
but he's the only person, like every weird thing that happens, he's like, oh, what the hell? And he acts like scandalized and shocked by everything that happens, and no one around him ever thinks anything is weird or wrong or cares or even cares.
It's like they're more of just like, why are you making a big deal of it?
Yeah, exactly. But it in a weird way, it's like a dark horror comedy about like being surrounded by crazy people.
I think there is a very, very interesting horror movie just around Gozu itself. Like the cow-headed god.
Yeah, totally.
Like that could totally work.
But it's funny because it's 2003, so it's very much after like Cure and Pulse and Ring and like all of these kind of like Japanese horror movies were even, I think, like what year does American Ring come out? Like maybe like 2006? Something 4? Like 4, something like that. So like the height of like the Japanese wave of like
which
influential.
I always thought was weird because like part of what made original Ring so good was like the VHS element of it. And you release this movie in what essentially is the dawn of digital.
yeah. But that being said, this is Japanese horror at like the height of its influence, and Gozu is almost like a weird parody of Japanese horror movies.
It doesn't feel like a straight horror movie. Again, like it's a comedy.
This definitely is a comedy.
This is a freaking comedy. Like,
it definitely is a comedy.
But
both of these are just in weird ways.
There is a straight.
They're also.
Horror
I feel
movie.
both these movies are meant to be shown to people. There's like this. Both of them have things.
They're both reactionary.
Yes, and they're shock seeking and they're novelty seeking. These are novelty seeking.
They're more interested
experiences.
In,
both of them are
reaction from the audience more than anything.
Both of them are trying to show you and have you experience something that it knows you will never have experienced anywhere else.
Like, I don't think they're necessarily saying anything, or like they're
sometimes, but definitely not always.
Right. It's not this. Oh,
not every moment has some like deeper, more complicated meaning
or messaging behind.
Right. Although that doesn't mean it doesn't have aesthetic value.
Right. Or a theming at all, but more just like it's very much a situation of like clearly the audience is meant to put more into.
It's kind of cool though in a way that like the audience and like the sharing, like the way that we share things, the way that we show people things is like a part of the art of these movies. They've searched out the process through which you might be interested in or curious enough about something to show someone else it. Like there's like a built-in mimetic quality to these movies where they're intended to to elicit the reaction that would lead you to showing it to someone else.
Well, yeah.
Which is actually kind of what The Ring's about, too.
I think at that point, like, Ichi the Killer is far more successful at that.
Definitely.
Like, Gozu is more of the, I feel like, is definitely a kind of, like, indie, like, if you know type deal. Whereas
Definitely.
Ichi is far more of the
actual cult. It's a cult film.
Right, trying to attempt what I think what you're describing, that the goal of it being that's the intention. But
Ichi the Killer definitely succeeds at being a cult film.
Which one would you say you prefer?
Ichi the Killer, but Gozu's still pretty funny, pretty interesting.
I definitely agree. Honestly, I think I was far more disappointed with Gozu than I was like interested in Gozu. And it kind of goes back to the whole, I was really bored of the Japanese Twin Peaks stuff, which like, again, if you like Twin Peaks and Japanese Twin Peaks, by all means, cool. But I was sold on a cowhead horror movie, and this was not a cowhead horror movie. Like, there is a alternate timeline or universe where Gozu is like the Eldritch cowhead, like Minami and Ozaki's story still going on, right? And that is a very compelling thing. The fact that we have no drama between Minami and Ozaki, I think, is a detriment to the film. Because that is a super compelling story by itself. That Minami is conflicted. He has to put down Ozaki. This is like a mice and men type situation with like he's
being asked to kill the person he cares most about.
Exactly,
most,
right?
Yeah.
Or admires most, right? This is his big brother, and he has to kill him and put him down and come back to the organization. And for, most likely what occurred is Ozaki was the one who brought him into the organization in the first place.
Well, that's what he says. There's a line that says, "You saved my life."
Right.
It says it twice.
Okay, so yeah.
Like Ozaki saved his life somehow
by probably bringing him into the organization or whatever.
When he was down really bad. Yeah.
So then he owes him a lot. But, clearly he's like super conflicted, and none of that is really played on at all. Because Ozaki
instead they clown on the fact that he's a virgin.
Yeah, huh?
They talk about that a lot. They talk about how big his penis is. And he's never had sex. Those are the kinds of things.
Ozaki gifts him women's lingerie.
Which then he ends up giving back to her.
Yeah.
After she births himself.
Yeah. It's
I thought it was cool. I think that I really like the weird Freudian vibes. I like Gozu. I think it's cool. I think the cast is really iconic and memorable. It has a bunch of iconic and memorable things that happen in it.
I want my Eldritch horror cowhead god movie where it's a cult and it's this weird innkeeper who's keep the breast milk shit, and that shit was weird. That shit was cool. They pray to a cowhead god called Gozu, and imagine it's a whole small town or a small rural community that's
obsessed with a cowhead god,
built on dairy farming and stuff like that, and all of them are obsessed with milk, and all they do is produce milk and stuff like that, and
all right, well, I can't wait to see the sequel that you write to the movie you didn't like.
But yeah, I mean, it's okay.
I like it.
I don't think it's bad. It's not shot terribly. It's not paced poorly, really. I think it's definitely intended to be seen at that pace. It's emulating the Twin Peaks pacings of that weird burn, not necessarily slow burn, but more of a weird burn.
It is weird. It's very awkward. It enjoys being awkward, for sure. But it doesn't have the soapy aspects of, because I think it's the soap opera elements that really draw people into Twin Peaks, and it doesn't have really any of that.
I think instead of the soap opera elements of Twin Peaks, it kind of kept more of the comedic and the more horror leaning elements of Twin Peaks.
Right.
And that kind of misses the juggling act that Twin Peaks.
There's no Angelo Badalamenti to draw you in,
or the classic Twin Peaks music where it's of her face from her high school yearbook photo or whatever. But yeah, I think it's pretty good. Maybe not necessarily my cup of tea.
I was vibing with it. So what are we watching next week?
What did we decide on again? We had definitely decided on something. It was an anime, and now I totally forgot.
What was it?
No, it wasn't. It was hard boiled. we fucking got it at the same time. Okay, let's cut back. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So outro time. I mean, I guess we could both say we relatively enjoyed these movies.
I love these movies. I think they're great.
I would.
They are definitely the kind of thing you leave on in the background and maybe play at parties or whatever.
I wouldn't
show
put
to people.
Ichi the Killer on the background. I would care. I would be more concerned with who I show Ichi the Killer with. I would also not.
The
put
world's become a
Gozu
more
on-
sensitive place in 20 years.
But definitely in terms of filmmaking quality, I think I would rate Ichi the Killer slightly higher than Gozu. Gozu is definitely more of an easier watch, especially in terms of overt violence.
Yeah, there's not nearly as much violence.
But
next week we're watching Hard Boiled.
yes,
John Woo
and
Chow
John Woo.
Yun-fat, Tony Leung. Is that our first Hong Kong action movie?
I think so.
Finally, we've gotten to
Woohoo!
Hong Kong action stuff.
We've left the island of the rising sun, and we've now entered
Canton. Old school Canton.
Is it Canton?
Yeah,
I guess, yeah.
Hong Kong's in Canton.
It's technically not China because like Hong Kong was so independent when this
Wasn't
movie
back then, but Canton's a region.
Yeah, so regional dialect stuff like that. But anyways, next week, Hard Boiled.
Yeah, we're talking about Hard Boiled, and if you got comments or thoughts or feelings, comment below, and take care.
All right, adios.